Hello and welcome to this video tutorial where I will show you how to sew this underarm gusset on my Jurassic coat pattern. I'll run you through from start to finish all of the steps, and there is a separate video which I will link down below where you can find out how to sew the welt pocket step by step. So the tutorial for the gusset will start now. Thank you. I've gone ahead and I've sewn the front and back sleeve pieces together. So I press that seam open and I put that to one side, and I'm just going to create the pleat on the coat front. So we've got these two markers here, and then there's some notches at the top. So you just bring those elements together like that. So I'm doing it from the front or the right side of the coat. Let me just grab my pins. And I just want to pin that in place, maintaining the angle that the markers are telling us. Okay, and then I just want to use a long straight stitch just to base this pleat in place. So within the seam allowance, I'll do it about half a centimetre away from the fabric edge, just a machine sewn line across there. Let's grab my machine, change you round a bit. Right, here we go. So I'm on a long stitch length again, because this is just to sort of tack it in place. If you don't want to do any of these tacking or basting things on the machine, you can do it by hand. Right, so that's sufficient to keep it in place. So we'll take that away from the machine, snip our ends, like so, and there we have it. One pleat basted in place. So I'll just keep this pin here for now. In the instructions I do say that you can just sort of whip stitch this with a hand stitch just to retain the angle. Let me just make sure that those are touching. But I think I'll just leave a pin there for now, just for speed, and we shall grab our sleeve piece. Hopefully this is far enough away to show you exactly what I'm doing. It's hard to get any further than this just because of the space I'm working with is quite limiting, but I've got my sleeve front here, which is already attached to the sleeve back. So the sleeve front is the sleeve piece with the gusset extension on the side, and then I've got my coat front, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin these pieces together with right sides together, and there's a few pieces that need to align. So let me just get that out the way. We'll start down here with this marker. So on the instructions I've got this marked as gusset point A, and make sure those two are aligned, and yep. And I'll just pin this top edge as well. And then this marker here, it should sit over the edge of the pleat. And then everything else we'll just pin into place. Okay, so hopefully that's clear. So I want to sew from this top edge, which is the neck edge, down to this marker, which is point A of the gusset. Okay, right, so let's just get to the machine. It's a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance again, so I'll start at the neck edge and I'll just get a back tack going there and remove the pins as I go. And then when you get closer to the pleats, just make sure that it's folded in properly. Sometimes that bit can get puckered. I should maybe have put a few more pins there. So I'll just hold it down. Get us past there. And now I know that's aligned, I'm just going to pull that out as I... Okay, I was merrily sewing away there with no bobbin. So I got as far as the pleat, which is good. So I'll start somewhere in there and then I'll just carry on. I've taken some of the pins out, but that's fine. Everything just sort of smushes together. It's one of the beauties of sewing with wool. It's just does exactly what you want it to. Kind of. Shouldn't speak too soon, should I? Right, so I've got to the marker, so I'm just going to make sure to hold it down with my fingers so that nothing budges out of place. And then stop at the marker with the needle down. Don't go beyond it. This is really where the accurate sewing comes into play. So back tack from there, so it's nice and secure. And then you can take it away from your machine. Whilst I'm at this point, I'm just going to remove these markers because I don't really need them there anymore, and I'd much rather do it as I go than leave them all to the end because they're much harder to remove. So that's my tailor's tacks. So I kind of use a combination throughout my sewing of tailor's tacks and sometimes using chalk. On this pale fabric, I haven't been using chalk. I've been using this blue fabric pen because obviously chalk wouldn't show up. But I do love tailor's tacks just for their permanence, and for an area like this I think they're just the best solution, to be honest, because they are going nowhere. Right, let's just clean up these threads from up here as well, and I'll remove this pin that's holding the pleat down. Okay, so lots of adjusting of camera angles. So we've got the sleeve attached to the coat front. We've got our pleat here. Oh, excuse me. And then the bottom of this raglan seam is just left unsewn because that's where the gusset will go. So here's our little gusset just in there. Right, so let's see what's next. I need to attach the sleeve to the coat back. So I'm going to approach these pleats on the coat back much the same way as the ones on the coat front, but there's no other markers other than the notches at the top because these are vertical pleats and they don't go in at an angle because they're not, the ones on the front are effectively open bust outs. These are just to add fullness to the back, so here you go straight down. So I just need to line those notches and pin that in place. So that I can machine baste it again. I'll do the other one as well whilst we're here. Right, so let's go back to the machine. So a long straight machine stitch about 1/2 centimetre away from the fabric edge, and just to tack that down basically. So I've got my coat back, and I need to pin my sleeve back to it with right sides together. So now we've got a little bit more fabric to handle, because the coat front is attached to the sleeve front. So I just want to align the neck edge. We've got this point down here of the gusset, so there's one right at the side seam and there's one about 10 centimeters further up, and you just want to align this one that's 10 centimeters further up, and in the instructions that's labeled as point C of the gusset. So once they are aligned, that can be pinned, and again this point aligns with the dart edge, the pleat edge, so that can be pinned. Oh, is that in the right place? Right, there we go. So I shall go back to the machine and sew this seam. I've actually just adjusted my pins to be on the coat back side. They were on the sleeve side, and because I want to sew from the neck edge down to the gusset point, it wouldn't have been possible to do that by having it that way up. So I've just moved the pins to the other side, and I'll sew it this way up instead. Just to keep the direction of sewing the same, just because it can sometimes it can affect how the seams lay. So by sewing the same direction for each one, it just means that the fabric is affected in exactly the same way and doesn't make it look distorted. If that were going to be the case. Sorry for the camera shake. And again, stop exactly at point C, or at this gusset point, should I say, and don't go beyond it, and back tack. There we go, so it's nice and secure. And I shall remove these tailor tacks whilst we're here. Make it nice and tidy. Right, so I'm going to go ahead and press these seams now, and then I'll come back. Right, so what we've got here is a good part of a coat. I've just pressed the seams as far as I've sewn them, and then I've just shown a bit of steam to the top of this pleat just to kind of set it in the direction that I want it to go. Just trim these ends. And now it's time to pin and sew the side seam of the coat front and the coat back. I'm not going to do both sides with you of the coat. I'm just going to do this left hand side and get it completed from start to finish. So we've got these are gusset markers at the top of the side seam. So let me just move these scissors. These are marked as point B on the instructions, and you just want to align those two. Pop a pin in. You've got some notches a bit further down. And you've got your hem notches there. And you can just pin in between there. And in between there. I don't know if you can hear my fridge humming in the background. Apologies if you can. This is the quietest area of the house. Right, let's sew this side seam. So I will start at this point and remove this pin before I sew over it, and back tack, not going beyond that point, and then sew down to the hem. 1.5 centimetre seam allowances everywhere. Right, I'll go and press this seam, and then we can complete sewing the gusset. Let's remove these tailor's tacks as well. Right, next up is the sleeve seam. So again, it's aligning these points here, which are points D on the instructions. So it's the top of the sleeve seam, and then we've got a notch halfway down-ish, and a hem notch somewhere. Wonderful. And we'll sew this seam just down here. I went ahead and sewed the sleeve seam without you, I'm afraid. I think I forgot that you actually weren't in the room with me. So I've sewn it, pressed it, removed the tailor's tacks, and the next thing to do is to finish sewing the front raglan sleeve. So we need to get this point B to here. In order to do that, we're going to need to snip into this corner. So if I just go from here right up to the stitch line but not beyond it, and then we can just pivot this piece, and we can pin that in place just there. Let's get a better pin than that. Okay, so you want to line that marker with the top of the side seam and pop a pin in there, and then I'll just pop another pin in there. Okay, so you can see that that's the front armhole. Okay, so I've just basically snipped into there so that this square piece now pivots to become a straight line. So we'll sew across this short piece of seam now. Right, so I don't know how many times I've said right so throughout this tutorial, apologies. I'll start somewhere on the seam that I've already sewn, and I'll just do a little back tack. Then when I get to this snipped area, what I'll do is I'll just go over that a few times, just to to make it super secure. You could use a smaller stitch there as well, but I think that should be okay. Well, I know it's okay because I've made it before and worn it a lot. So here we are. So keep sewing down to that last point. Take that pin out before I break my machine, and then don't sew beyond the point, okay? And then we'll remove that from the machine, and then remove the tailor's tack, and there we go. So that's all joined, and I've got these ends to remove. Okay, so let me zoom you out again so we can pin the next part. Right, so now we've flipped around to the coat back, and we've still got some of this gusset to sew. I don't know what this looks like down here, but it looks a bit funny. And we need to sew this edge here to the back armhole. So this would be point C, matching to point C of the raglan sleeve. So what I'll do is I will pin that point matching up to the bottom of the seam that's already been sewn, and put a pin there, and then adjust things a bit so that I can sew, pop in another pin just here, and we'll sew this little seam here. Right, so let's get these layers in my machine. Not quite the right point, there we go. So I'm keeping to your 1.5 centimetres. Again, don't go beyond the points. Need to stick within your markers. And then I'll remove this tailor's tack here. Doing that off shot, so that's not helpful. Right, let me stop the camera. Right, and the final piece of the puzzle is to sew the remaining part of that gusset to this sleeve edge. So what I need to do is snip into this corner here, ta-da, just to release it a bit. And the same as on the sleeve front, so you're just trying to create a straight line. So you've snipped into there so that it will straighten out a bit and enable you to sew it. So no more markers left on here for me. Just need to sew that little bit of seam, and I'll have something to show you. Right, squish that in, needle down, pin out. And because I've snipped this seam allowance right up to the stitching, I'm going to just reinforce that with some back tacks. So some forwards, backwards action. Just to strengthen that area. And there we go, move these threads. Right, just to give you a clear visual of what we've ended up with, this is the coat front, so this is my pocket bag. This is the sleeve seam, the raglan sleeve, and this is what the gusset looks like on the front sleeve. And then if I flip the coat round to see the back, you've got a triangle of sewing on the back sleeve. So this is the raglan seam, side seam, sleeve. Okay, so that's what it should look like. And let's turn it round to the front so you can see what the construction looks like from the front. Ooh. Right, here we go. So there's the front. As you turn it round, you can see that this piece sort of wraps underneath and comes out the back. Okay, and that's your gusset.